I had never been chosen or selected for anything based on my skills or abilities as an individual before. So, as you can probably tell, the psychological stakes around me making this Defender Challenge team were staggering. And then combine that with a possible chance to go home after having been overseas for several months, it was a pretty big deal. But there's no way I could have known what needed to happen. Welcome back to the story. This is Chapter 3. Gunshots echoed off of the cliffs at Andersen Air Base, Guam, as I stood there overlooking the field of fire. Out in front of us, there was a grassy field with these green silhouette targets of a torso that would pop up in 50-meter increments from 50 meters to 300 meters. And they would pop up for a few seconds at a time. And this was the next event. So after 6 weeks of training in Korea, physical fitness and combat skills training, I felt like I was ready to compete for my chance to go to the main event in Texas. Things had gone well so far on the obstacle course and in the fitness challenges and the run. I had done well on the pistol, going down the course, shooting metal targets, plink, plink, plink. Now we were down to the last event, and I was excited because the M16 marksmanship was my best event. I'm lying on the hard concrete, which feels relatively cool compared to the steamy air surrounding us. And I'm looking down the sights of my rifle, watching the targets pop up. And I'm able to be conscious enough to control my breathing, nice and smooth. And I squeeze the trigger, and I can tell these shots are going where they need to go. I'm feeling good about it. After 30 rounds, the bolt locks back, the magazine is empty. I take the magazine out, slap a new one in, and I send the bolt forward, but it didn't go forward all the way. So I slapped the magazine from underneath, and then I pulled the bolt back to inspect the chamber to see what the problem was. And because my hands were so sweaty and the air was so humid, it slipped. The little handle slipped from underneath my fingers, went forward, took another round from the magazine, and jammed it into the chamber. So now I have 2 rounds trying to squeeze into the chamber. It was a double feed. I couldn't believe it. I was scrambling to try to get the other round out, but it's smooth brass, right? I just have no grip on my fingers, and I'm scrambling. All the while, I can hear the other competitors just blasting off rounds next to me, and I know the clock is running down. The clock is running out, and I'm just struggling. I'm laying on my side trying to get this out, and I just can't get a grip with my fingers. And then the range boss calls, "Time! Lay down your weapons." And I put my weapon down, and I knew it. And when the score sheet came out, I already knew what it was going to say, that if I had just had the opportunity to get a few of those rounds off, I would have made the team. I barely missed it. So, feeling dejected, I returned to Korea and resumed my normal duties as an Air Force gate guard. I was back to what I had been doing before, but this time feeling just a little bit lower. I remember one night I was in my gate shack with the door open so it wouldn't feel so small, and just watching the moths come up to the light, moving around, fluttering, and just thinking, wow, what am I doing with my life? And then I hear this chatter coming up the way, and it's this group of aircraft mechanics, and they stop and they show me their badge, and I match the badge to their faces, and then they continue walking on into the flight line, into a hangar. They just kind of fade away into the night, and I remember thinking, wow, those guys are off to do something important. They're gonna, fix or repair these F-16 fighter jets. They're contributing to the mission where I'm really not doing anything. It's highly unlikely that any credible threat is going to come or try to come through my gate. So I'm feeling pretty useless there with my rifle that used to be a source of pride, right? To have this responsibility, to be trusted to carry this rifle around with 210 rounds of ammunition. And then comes the realization that you're never going to use those. They're really not for anything. And then I see these headlights approaching the gate, and so I get off my stool because it was kind of late at night, and I wasn't expecting any cars to come through. And as it approaches, I see that it's my flight sergeant's vehicle. I can see the police decals and the light bar on top. And I'm like, oh, my flight sergeant is just coming to pay a visit. It's a normal thing they do, check on us, see how we're doing. Give us bathroom breaks, right? Because like little kids, we can't just go to the bathroom. We have to call a patrol to relieve us. So sometimes we would resort to having a Gatorade bottle in the shack because they weren't always available to relieve us. So anyway, this car, my flight sergeant is approaching the gate, but he's not slowing down. So I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of weird. And then he just blows through the gate. He looks straight ahead, doesn't even acknowledge me. He just blows through the gate. I'm like, oh, okay. So holding my rifle sling over my shoulder, I mosey back into my shack and I sit down on the stool to continue sulking. And then I get a call on the radio. Charlie 5 was my position, and they say, Charlie 5, did you just have a vehicle run your gate? Then I stared at the radio for a second before picking it up to respond, and I thought, So I clicked the button and I said, negative. Wait, do you mean Sergeant McGantry? Because I've only had one vehicle come through here in the last hour, and it was Sergeant McGantry. Then it hit me, and I felt my face just get flush with frustration. Then over the radio comes, Charlie 5, we're trying to start a security exercise. You need to report it when a vehicle runs your gate. I just rolled my eyes and said, Roger. But what I really wanted to say is, fine, let's all pretend that our flight sergeant is a bad guy so we can give ourselves something to do and feel important for a little bit. This was actually a pretty normal thing we did as military police, security guards, because there just wasn't a lot going on. And so we had to keep people engaged, give them something to do. They had to pretend like there was a bad guy. Yet they never went to any length to disguise people and make us think that they were actually bad guys. Maybe that's because we probably would have shot them. I don't know. So I really didn't feel like I did much as a security policeman. In fact, there was only one time I ever placed handcuffs on somebody, and that was when a bus was coming back from downtown. It was coming into the front gate at night, and there was an airman who was told that he wasn't allowed to leave base, but he left base anyway. So we had to go on the bus and check everybody's ID cards when the buses were coming back in. And there he was, this poor young airman. I had to have him stand up and take him off the bus and handcuff him. And it was a very awkward experience for both of us because I hardly knew what I was doing. I'd never done it outside of training before. And I feel kind of bad for admitting that I was kind of hoping the guy would take a swing at me just to make it a little bit more interesting. But at the same time, I felt bad for him because what if he was feeling the same thing that I was feeling? Like he's away from home in this foreign country and he just doesn't feel like he's doing what he thought he was going to be doing, that he doesn't feel like he's really contributing. He doesn't feel like he needs to be there. And this idea of being in the military, you know, all this thank you for your service stuff, maybe it wasn't enough for him, just like it wasn't enough for me. Now, I had never thought of myself as suicidal because I don't think I was depressed, but I was definitely unhappy. And when you're unhappy and you have a lot of hours alone in these gate shacks to think about the choices you've made and how you got there and what the prospects were for your life going forward, it can lead to some dark thoughts. So there were times when I did think about, like, what if I really wanted to get out of this right now? How would I do that? And this is not something easy to talk about because my mind would wander into these really dark places about, like, what would that actually look like if I were to do that? I would need to make accommodations, hold the rifle this way and use this setting on the rifle. And what would that mean for, a shift change for whoever came out to take my place? So it wasn't good. But like I said, when you're not in a happy place and your mind wanders into these dark areas, it's dangerous. But I didn't realize it then, but that's where I needed to be. Actually, I needed to be at my lowest place to prepare me for what was coming next. February is an especially sad time to be living off the coast of the Yellow Sea on the Korean Peninsula. Low-hanging gray clouds and this wet cold that just bites through anything you're wearing. So I was in my guard shack on this February day, and I had a heater. I was fairly comfortable until this car approached my gate, and he stops there. So I grab my rifle and I step outside of my gate, and as I open the door, this blast of cold air just hits me in the face. It's just so miserable. And The wind is causing me to have to steady myself walking across all the snow that's been compacted into ice as I walk around this man's car. And I come around to the side and he rolls down the window and this blast of warm air comes up to greet me, and it was very welcomed. And he holds out his badge and he says, "Hey there." And I looked at his badge, flipped it over, gave it back to him, saluted him. He returned his salute with a smile. Then he drove off. And walking back to my gate shack, I just had this incredible moment of clarity that we're responsible for our lives. And it felt good because I knew in that moment that if I'm responsible from where I'm at now, I'm responsible for where I'm going, which means I can go any direction I want to go in. And I also realized about that man, he was wearing this awesome brown leather jacket, the classic pilot bomber jacket. And I realized that he was happy. The way he looked at me, the way he smiled, like that man was happy. I wanted what he had. I wanted to be happy like him. And of course he was happy. He was an officer. He was a pilot. He flies these amazing F-16 fighter jets. He has real purpose. The whole reason this base even exists is to support the fighter jets. And so he had this. And I'm thinking, of course he's happy. And that's what I want. I want to be happy like him. I want to have that job. I want to have the same sense of purpose. And I decided right then and there that I was going to be a military pilot. And I walked back to my shack and I couldn't even sit down because I was just so charged up. I just knew it. I knew that I was going to make something of my life from that moment on. And I was going to go to college. I was just going to suck it up and I was going to get a degree. And it still seemed so far-fetched because of everything that had to happen. I had to get a college degree. I had to make myself competitive to meet the board. I had to get selected to be an officer, to get into pilot training. There was so much ahead of me. And at the same time, it just seemed overwhelming, but it also didn't matter because I was just so firm in my resolve that I just knew it was going to happen. I was going to be a military pilot. Well, that was chapter 3. I hope you're enjoying this so far. I'd love to hear what you have to say if you feel like leaving me a comment. In the next chapter, we're going to find out if this was a real epiphany, if this was a real life-changing moment that I was having, or if this was just a fleeting good feeling. So I hope you come along to find out. Thanks for watching.